classroom are disciples, those who are trying to prepare themselves for entry into the evolutionary level above human, synonymous with the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to evacuate is to leave with us.
March 26, 1997, San Diego County deputies made their way into a home in Rancho Santa Fe. Upon entering the home, the deputies had stumbled across the remains of 39 bodies as a result of a mass suicide ritual. This ritual would be the final send-off for a cult started by a man and a woman named Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. The San Diego County deputies had discovered the final resting place of Heaven's Gate and its members. You see, Heaven's Gate was a cult that had amassed a large following. They had been established for almost 20 years when their story shook the world. What was Heaven's Gate? What was its purpose and beliefs? Will the world ever see another cult like this? Join me in this video as we dive into the infamous legacy of Heaven's Gate. Before the formation of Heaven's Gate, Marshall Herff Applewhite Jr. was born in Spur, Texas on May 17, 1931. Marshall's early life was quite normal, not going through any horrible traumas. He attended grade school and stayed out of major trouble, and even served in the U.S. Army. He went to college and decided to pursue education as a career. He would later resign from his position at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, claiming that he was having a hard time in his personal life. Some people suspect that this was actually a cover-up for the truth, which is that Marshall was in a relationship with a student. Marshall moved around different cities, working odd jobs, and eventually moved back to Houston following the death of his father. Soon after moving back, he met Bonnie Nettles, the woman who would help him inspire and create Heaven's Gate with him. Bonnie Lou Trousdale was born August 29th, 1927 in Houston, Texas. Bonnie, like Marshall, lived a relatively normal life. She worked as a registered nurse and was even married with 4 kids. Bonnie Nettles, the name more commonly known, comes from her ex-husband's surname, which she kept. Bonnie and her husband's marriage was pretty stable until 1972 when she met Marshall. Bonnie had a deep interest in the occult, astrology, and the paranormal. She would even frequently visit fortune tellers, one of which stated that she would be a tall, light-hair-colored man. Bonnie believed the man the fortune teller saw was Marshall. It is unknown as to how exactly Marshall and Bonnie met, but most theories point to simple hospital visits by Marshall. Regardless of exactly how they met, it is confirmed that it was in 1972. As soon as Bonnie and Marshall were acquainted, the two hit it off, claiming that there was an immediate spiritual connection. The two bonded over spiritual beliefs and curiosities, both having an interest in the occult, theology, and sci-fi. Bonnie and Marshall left together on New Year's Day, 1973. Bonnie's 3 youngest children stayed with their father, and her oldest daughter left along with her, just moving out, not following Bonnie and Marshall. Marshall had convinced Bonnie to run away with him. With their fascination for the occult and theology, they formed Heaven's Gate as co-founders. Marshall told Bonnie to be the sage and he would be the speaker. Marshall fully believed that Bonnie was in communication with higher spirits and extraterrestrial beings that would guide them and their followers to the next level of human consciousness. Beginning of Heaven's Gate. After leaving their old lives, Marshall and Bonnie stayed in Texas for a bit, but would soon begin traveling the US, attempting to grow their following and spread their gospel. They traveled to various places, and the first documented follower was a woman named Sharon Morgan, a woman who abandoned her family to follow Heaven's Gate. She later came to her senses and returned to her family after about a month. The law would catch up to them soon for a petty reason. Marshall had not returned the car they were using to travel, and the agency put out an arrest warrant for him. Marshall was arrested and sentenced to 6 months in jail, where he would be released in the early part of 1975, and after being released, quickly resumed his tour with Bonnie. Resuming the Heaven's Gate tour, Marshall and Bonnie would host meetings and attempt to meet like-minded individuals and recruit followers. Just a couple months later, in April 1975, Heaven's Gate would have a major breakthrough. Roughly 80 people had gathered to hear the word of Heaven's Gate in Studio City, Los Angeles. Many people recall Marshall and Bonnie as being charming and charismatic, having a deep passion for their beliefs, and so much so that the meeting garnered them 25 new devoted followers who decided to put their life on pause and follow the congregation of Heaven's Gate. Following their largest breakthrough, Heaven's Gate would continue traveling and recruiting. Eventually, the congregation grew to about 100 members, all traveling together and sleeping in tents, sleeping bags, and begging on the side of the road to make ends meet for the congregation. The traveling congregation of Heaven's Gate would continue to do this for years, having members join and drop out, returning to their normal lives. Unfortunately, Bonnie began to develop cancer, which started in her eye and spread down to her liver, and ultimately was the reason that she passed. Bonnie Nettles died on June 19, 1985, at Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Marshall told the rest of the members that Bonnie was chosen to leave early and to enter the next level, but that Marshall was left behind to continue guiding the congregation. Bonnie was cremated and had her ashes spread on an undisclosed lake in Texas. Beliefs. Some more on the actual beliefs and what Marshall and Bonnie were preaching to their followers. The overarching theme of Heaven's Gate involves both extraterrestrial life and Christian beliefs. What Marshall and Bonnie were telling their followers is that they were two unique individuals chosen by God to lead their followers to enlightenment, fulfill biblical prophecies, and that they were the two witnesses mentioned in the book of Revelations in the Bible. To help recruit followers, Marshall and Bonnie even went as far as creating pamphlets and propaganda resembling scripture. The pamphlet mainly tried to convince readers that the reincarnation of Jesus Christ was a man from Texas and fitting the physical appearance of Marshall. The belief ran so deep that Marshall truly believed and would tell his followers that he was a direct descendant of Jesus Christ, and that the true Jesus Christ was a normal man who was housing an alien spirit, which gave him the power of miracles and divinity. And because of his belief, he considered himself to be the second coming of Jesus mentioned in prophecy. These beliefs led to Marshall and Bonnie adopting a large number of aliases, calling themselves Doe and T, Bo and Peep, the Two, and the UFO Two. Unlike most cults, Bonnie and Marshall wholeheartedly believed their prophecy and were devoted. While some cults may disguise the promise of salvation behind drugs and debauchery, Heaven's Gate had strict rules and guidelines. Celibacy was the norm, and any type of drug use was forbidden. Some more insight on the extraterrestrial and religious connection is that it is a progression. Heaven's Gate believed that human life began as normal humans, and that the world Abrahamic religions are a result of extraterrestrial intervention. The main belief of Heaven's Gate is that humans are meant to evolve and reincarnate into alien life and travel the universe, gaining more knowledge and continuing the cycle. Heaven's Gate also believes that God is a highly developed and advanced extraterrestrial being. The connection between aliens and religion is intertwined in the entire belief system. Heaven's Gate also believes that the rapture mentioned in the Bible is done by a UFO, and that it is possible to be raptured early and move on to the next level in human evolution before the rapture in the end of times. Another very interesting fact about the group is that some of the men, including Marshall, even went as far as being medically castrated to further solidify the concept of celibacy and attempt to familiarize themselves with the next level of evolution, which would have no need for male extremities. And the final, most noteworthy belief is ultimately what led to the mass suicide that gained Heaven's Gate its legacy. The belief is that the Hale-Bopp comet was the sign for Heaven's Gate to have their final send-off. This theory is rooted in the fact that Heaven's Gate also believed that choosing to end your own life in a controlled and organized manner was another way to enter the next level of human evolution. Towards the end of the establishment of Heaven's Gate, Marshall believed that everyone who was still a part of the crew was devoted and ready to say goodbye to their earthbound bodies and transcend. With the passing of the comet Hale-Bopp, Marshall decided it was time for Heaven's Gate to say goodbye. Ending of Heaven's Gate and ritual. The congregation of Heaven's Gate continued for some time. They went on for years, recruiting followers and continuing to preach their gospel. Fast forward to the mid-90s, they even had their own website where they would promote their philosophy and accept donations. This website, paired with donations from members, was enough to allow Heaven's Gate to rent a mansion home in Rancho Santa Fe, a suburb of San Diego. This mansion was called the Monastery, and it was a 9,200 square foot home in a nice area. Heaven's Gate was doing incredibly well financially, and even going as far as getting alien abduction insurance, insuring up to 50 members. The Heaven's Gate movement had proven to take themselves serious. They had even purchased land near Manzano, New Mexico, and began construction of a compound, but they did not get very far in the construction and quickly abandoned the compound. A comet had been discovered by two astronomers in 1995 and predicted to fly near Earth in the near future. Some conspiracy theorists and sci-fi fanatics suspected that the comet Hale-Bopp was being followed by a UFO. Well, this information, paired with the discovery of a brand new comet at the time, was a sign Marshall was looking for. He believed the comet Hale-Bopp was hiding the UFO that would take him and his congregation to the next level. Marshall began to plan the group's exit. Marshall videotaped himself explaining the philosophy and explaining why he and his congregation would leave the earth and ascend to the level after human. The name of the video is called Doe's Final Exit, and it also includes some goodbye messages from other members. Members participating in the mass suicide ritual were given a choice of pudding or applesauce that was then mixed with phenobarbital. Phenobarbital is an anti-seizure medication that can cause respiratory depression if taken in high doses. Members would eat their share of the mix and wash it down with a shot of vodka, then proceed to lay down, having another member cover their head with a plastic bag to induce suffocation. Once the member was confirmed dead, another member would remove the plastic bag and position the deceased in a fixed position and cover them with a large, square purple sheet, laying them to rest. They would repeat this cycle until all members had finished. The congregation also dressed themselves in black t-shirts, black sweatpants, and Nike Decades. Members of Heaven's Gate were also found with a $5 bill and 3 quarters, totaling $5.75, which was symbolic among the group. There are a couple of explanations as to what exactly this symbolized, but none have been confirmed. And that was the end of Heaven's Gate. Over a span of a couple days during March 1997, the congregation of Heaven's Gate had left their vehicles to reach the next level.
And let me say that our mission here at this time is about to come to a close in the next few days. We came from distant space, and even what some might call somewhat of another dimension, and we're about to return from whence we came.
The aftermath. Before finishing the ritual, Marshall had mailed out copies of the videotape to former members and to some news outlets who had tried to schedule interviews but had been turned down. A man named Rio D'Angelo received a copy of the tapes and made his way to the home in Rancho Santa Fe. D'Angelo was the first one to the scene. He made his way into the home through the back door and recorded what he saw. He later went and alerted the police. Police arrived and discovered 39 adult bodies, 21 women and 18 men, ages varying from 26 through 72. Police had all of the bodies cremated. When news of Heaven's Gate got out, it shocked the world. Alan Hale, one of the men who discovered the comet, stated that the day news outlets covered Heaven's Gate's story, his phone did not stop ringing for the entire day. The news coverage of Heaven's Gate inspired a couple of other people across the country. It is confirmed that a man in Marysville, California committed suicide and tried to copy the exact details he heard on the news, leaving behind a note that read, "I'm going on the spaceship with Hale-Bopp to be with those that have gone before me." This man was not a former member of Heaven's Gate, but 3 former members of Heaven's Gate heard the news and committed suicide in the following months. The cult of Heaven's Gate stands as one of the most infamous cults in American history. Hopefully, the world never sees another cult like Heaven's Gate again. What started as 2 friends bonding over shared interests in theology and religion evolved into an entire religious movement that garnered hundreds of followers and convinced 39 people to take their own lives, with the promise of reaching a higher level of human consciousness. What do you think about Heaven's Gate? Do you know any more interesting facts about Heaven's Gate? Do you think it's possible for another cult like Heaven's Gate to rise again? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching.